Some of the other ideas that I think around fear is the anxiety basically a biological process? So there's a great book. Forgotten the author, but it's by a Harvard psychiatrist called Brain Energy. And basically, what he's pushing is a new theory around basically mitochondrial dysfunction, which is not producing enough energy, then causes the body to work incorrectly. And if the body's not producing enough energy, that enough energy doesn't get to the brain, and as a result, the brain doesn't function properly. And in certain people, that will create high levels of anxiety. So some of that sort of anxiety or fear could just be a biological process and not actually be mental.
Welcome to Risk and Rise, the podcast where we explore the journey of overcoming the fear of failure, embracing risk, and achieving success in entrepreneurship, creativity, and personal growth. I'm your host, Talana Simpson, and I'm thrilled to embark on this journey with you. Together we'll discover the strategies, insights, and shifts in our thinking and attitudes that are needed to turn setbacks into stepping stones and transform fear into fuel for success. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive into today's episode of Risk and Rise. Today we're speaking to Paul Smith, and he's going to help us to look at failure from the perspective of success. It's going to be quite interesting. He has founded a number of companies in a variety of industries, and right now runs Civitas, a CEO network and peer learning organization for high growth entrepreneurs. So let's learn from Paul about what he knows in terms of best supporting high potential startups and founders. No way. Great. Well, thank you for joining me, Paul. And just to start off with, when you hear Risk and Rise, what comes to mind for you?
Oh, so much, eh? I think having been in the academic world with entrepreneurship, some interesting around risk profile. And I think entrepreneurs are seen as big risk takers. But there's actually a couple of really good studies and research that the best entrepreneurs are asymmetric risk takers, where they try to take things that looks like a big risk, but it's actually not a big risk, which is kind of interesting. And then obviously there's the other side of the argument where, there are some entrepreneurs that swing big and put it off sometimes. So I think that's what comes up when I hear risk.
Risk and Rise. And then you're quite an innovative entrepreneur yourself. You've started your own businesses and you'd work now a lot with other entrepreneurs, supporting them to get their businesses going. So I wonder if you can just share a bit about your journey, like your background, but also when you perhaps yourself initially confronted your fears in relation to failure in particular, but when it came around to starting something new, starting and getting going.
So yeah, I was heavily influenced by, I think, having parents who ran their own businesses. So that was one aspect where you've kind of seen it done. And then there's a lady called Sar Savathi, I think her name's pronounced, professor, which did some interesting work which showed that actually entrepreneurship isn't that risky. That when they say most people fail, what it really means is someone goes, tries it for a bit, and then just goes and gets a higher paying job afterwards. So I think much entrepreneurship, the risk side is actually overemphasized if you're doing small business type stuff. I think it's a little bit different if you're doing sort of entrepreneurship where you are raising big amounts of money, using other people's cash, and you have a really big J curve. So that means that you're just spending a lot of money for a long period of time before you get to break even. Where if you're starting a service business or many other businesses, the risks actually isn't that big, That's sort of a little bit how I think about it. I don't know if that answers.
Yeah, so in other words, you've never had, or have you ever had an experience where you feel like you failed, or other people would have called it a failure in your own journey with all the different enterprises you've been involved with and also started yourself? Have there been things that have
So
flopped?
yeah, so I ran a boutique innovation agency for a while, and that did pretty well. And at one stage, we had about, I think, about 12 million rands worth of contracts lined up, and basically they all got cancelled within a month because of the decision that some of the large corporates were clients. Even though that we were willing to sort of change our status and everything, they were going, no, no, we want to deal with level one founders, and basically the people doing the delivery have to also be local, basically like black founders. So that was quite hard, having to retrench a couple of the staff members. We were about, I think, about a team of about 10, and ultimately ended up splitting up with a partner. And there was definitely like a period where I lost a bit of confidence, and yeah, it took some time off to reflect and sort of get some bounce back. So I don't know if it was fear in the starting. The starting period was probably a little bit less scary. For Civitas, which is the business I run now, that came out of that period where I had a bit of a little bit of sort of a downer. And it was actually, I went and saw basically a psychologist, and he just said, no, you're smart enough to do anything. If you can, you've got most of a PhD and a master's, you could pull it off. And I just needed that words of affirmation to go, okay, cool, I can make this happen. And then I think the next day I sort of started on the Civitas journey.
Okay, and with the Civitas, and I know a lot of the work you do, or you have a strong interest since I've known you in growth entrepreneurs. So I wondered if you could just mention a bit about what that term means for those that maybe haven't heard about it, because then I want to just delve in a bit more there.
Yeah, sure. So growth entrepreneurs, there are a bunch of different definitions, but the idea is that maybe someone who starts a restaurant, they basically get the restaurant up and running, and they may be making a few million a year, and they're happy, and that's the lifestyle business. A growth entrepreneur, the idea is that you start something that can just keep growing, so it can keep scaling. So basically, you might go from 5 to 10 to 50 to 100 to 500 million to a billion. It's the idea there that you're sort of starting businesses that over time can become much larger organizations. And the reason that this was interesting to me is two kind of data points. The one is very much when I did my master's at University of Pretoria. There's a lot of academic literature that shows that uh, the large majority of the growth in the economy comes from these type of entrepreneurs. So in many sort of subsectors of the economy, say for example, you have a small town and there are 5 restaurants, and basically a 6th restaurant starts up. Usually what ends up happening is you just get a splitting of the pie. The pie doesn't become any bigger. Where with certain types of growth entrepreneurs, what actually happens is you make the pie bigger for everyone. You improve everyone's living standard, more tax gets paid. And I think that's the magic of the whole growth and technology entrepreneurship, is that you can actually impact everyone's lives for the better. It's not sort of a zero-sum game. It's a game where basically, because of certain growth entrepreneurs, we all have improved living standards and better services. And that's sort of an idea that really appealed to me.
So then in working with those kind of entrepreneurs, those growth entrepreneurs, what are some of the common patterns or habits that you might have observed amongst the more successful CEOs in how they manage and overcome their fear of failure and their setbacks?
Hmm. So I think, yeah, the setback ones, I think, to be honest, the entrepreneurial journey is hard, really hard. And I think there's a great quote from a cyclist, Greg LeMond, who won the Tour de France in the 80s, American, who says, things don't get easier, you just go faster. And I think you see that with a lot of these growth entrepreneurs where it doesn't get easier, it just gets a lot harder, where now you're dealing with bigger teams, there are more problems on your plate. Um, so I think that the overcoming setbacks it's almost as though it's not like a once-off thing that you need to overcome. It's almost like just this ongoing battle to like keep solving problems and keep growing. And yeah, I think that what what is probably separates the best entrepreneurs from the ones that struggle a whole lot more is probably momentum. You see with some of the better businesses that the businesses are growing. So, we're doubling or tripling or quadrupling each year. That means month on month, you're growing 10%, you're hiring staff. So I think that momentum is a huge thing which kind of keeps the dream alive. Where with someone who's maybe struggling and it becomes this long slog and there's no movement in revenue and it's kind of like you're fighting the same battle but not actually going forward. It's kind of is maybe the difference, which is a little bit harder. So I do think it does become a little bit easier if there is momentum. And I've seen it even with Civitas, where you have those big growth months, month on month, bigger, bigger, and you see the revenue moving up. It definitely makes the hard bits a whole lot easier.
Momentum. And what about any inner work or any kind of mindsets that some of those people might have? Because it must take, I was thinking like a growth entrepreneur, they've obviously got an eye for the opportunity to have found something that can grow in that way. But there must also be, I was wondering, a mindset behind that, a way of approaching problems in the world, or I don't know if I'm getting my question across, but
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So basically, I think that what is common, I think, about the growth entrepreneurs is they are smart in a domain. So I think what you do is you have some growth entrepreneurs who want to grow. They're keen to grow, but they're not. So they're putting in the hours, they're working hard, but the opportunity and the business model doesn't really allow them to grow. Where I think the people who have managed to crack it have been a little bit more strategic around, okay, cool, I want to start a growth business. They understand the opportunity well and what they're looking for, and then are able to understand the domain well enough to actually build that type of business. So I do think it's like smarts in the domain, and then there's probably some smarts around the opportunity identification. Is this a real opportunity or not? And the process to do that.
Yeah, so much more about the opportunity, kind of eyes for opportunity.
Yeah, eyes for opportunity and then process for opportunity. So there's enough sort of track record now that it's not kind of like the 50s where if you're trying to start a growth business, there wasn't a lot out there with the internet and Silicon Valley and the open sourcing and all the tech startups. And now the unicorns becoming like a common thing where there are now hundreds of people who've built billion-dollar companies and are kind of sharing those stories. There's definitely a process you can go through, the customer development, the lean startup, that enables you to go, okay, cool, how do we test and build models that scale? So I think there is opportunity, and then there's also execution around, okay, cool, how do we iterate and get to a model that is going to enable us to grow a larger business?
So, and another area that you're very interested in is also decision making. And I think that is part of how we bounce back from a failure, but also how we prevent failures in a way. Or that. But so could you share maybe a pivotal moment in your entrepreneurial journey or in someone else's that you've been, able to observe or be a part of, where the person may have confronted a failure or an uncertainty or something happened, but that has then shaped the way they approach risk-taking and decision-making going forward?
Oh, gee whiz, that's a complicated question. The answer I had, I thought, was is that kind of the idea that I think is most exciting around how do you turn failure into sort of a high growth business would be this idea of following your growth. So there's a guy in the community, Ross, who started a company called Versify, which was one of the fastest growing businesses in the community. They've put solar panels on hundreds of houses. I think it might even be thousands now. And basically, what they do is solar financing with roofs and batteries on where you can pay a few thousand rand, basically get the majority off the grid. And he initially started off as a marketing platform for basically everything under the sun for the home. So you could get painters, builders, boreholes, a whole bunch of different stuff. And what happened in that case is that the business was doing okay, but they were struggling to grow. And then what ended up happening is they saw that where leads were most valuable, so they would generate leads for these type of people. The best leads were for people who did roofing, boreholes, swimming pools, and solar panels. And they realized that those leads were worth a lot, and the companies that wanted those leads were usually a better quality company than someone who was like maybe a plumber. They had a little bit more organized. So they actually took their platform and offering 50 services. They just focused on lead gen for four, the four that were working. And then what ended up happening is they saw that the solar was really picking up. So they actually then made a second decision to follow their growth again and then just do solar. And then finally they made the decision as well, we actually need to control the customer experience end to end. And they then became a solar installer company and then would basically manage those providers and then added a finance element to that and then built software to make it happen. So it was that idea of following what's working. And I think that a lot of people go, the goal is to try stuff and learn from failure. Ideally, I think it's better to learn from success because there's a lot more lessons in seeing what works than like failure is just one wrong way to do things. Don't do it that way. Where success, there's a lot of little lessons around, okay, cool, how can I replicate a little bit more of that? So I think that it's worthwhile for people to really think in their businesses and their lives, where are the bright spots? What's working? And how do I do more of that? Maybe look at the periods in life where things were going well, or when I do stuff, things go a little bit better. Maybe let's try do a little bit more of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very interesting answer because it's always been so much more on how do we bounce back from a failure versus that story of following the success, it's almost I can see like a dashboard where the lights are the most bright. Keep going in that direction. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think 100%. I think it's a bit of a counterintuitive way to think about things, but definitely I think a wise way. Like do more of what works.
Yes. So then another area you're interested in is what they call disruptive entrepreneurship. So is that more like when the idea actually interrupts a whole industry or disrupts the status quo?
Yeah, so I think there, again, it speaks a little bit to the sort of high growth stuff. There was an amazing talk by Larry Page. I think Larry Page basically has disappeared from public life, but he was one of the founders of Google. I think incredibly smart. And if you ever have a chance to watch any of his talks or podcasts, do it. He's a really smart guy. And he did this one talk which he gave, I think, to some scientific foundation. And he quoted basically, he had won a Nobel Prize winning economist working for him, as you do when you're a Google founder. And he asked him what was behind, like basically economic growth and living standards. And basically what really is progress is really technology entrepreneurship, is where we bring a new technology and that new technology makes everyone a little bit more productive. So basically, if you look at sort of in the hundreds, early part of the last century. Basically, if you were housewife, you spend most of your time just doing the washing and the bathing, and it was just. And then we basically got electricity, and we got all of these home appliances, and suddenly all of that could now be done in a 10% of your time, freeing up 90% of someone. So I'm not sure the exact stats, but it was some big number like that. And I think that is what is kind of scary because it means a lot of change. But the upside of it is that it makes just life better for everyone if we can get that right and pull the best out of it. There's actually an amazing article that if you haven't read around techno optimism by one of the founders of Andreessen Horowitz, a top venture capital firm in Silicon Valley, called the Techno Optimism Manifesto. There's basically this idea that we can really, if we double down on technology and technology entrepreneurship, we could really create not a perfect society, but surely like a much better society than we currently are if we could get more people to buy into that and do more. So I'm kind of buying into that manifesto, and sort of that's really been what I've been trying to do in my career, and would like to do a whole lot more of.
So you said something there about the disruptive process, that there's a lot of fear in it. And there's obviously the other side of that, and that's the risk usually. There's a lot of reward, and yet there's a lot of fear to that change or that disruption. So what insights maybe could you offer on how that disruptive thinking can help us to overcome fear, but also drive innovation in our businesses? So it's almost like using disruptive thinking as a tool, and yet we still got to be able to manage the fear that it would bring.
Yeah, I think I was talking fear more on the fact like new technology. So you currently, when obviously the initial cotton gin, all the people burnt it because they were worried all the cotton pickers would lose their jobs. And then there was obviously all the fear around when the cars got introduced, all of the horse people in the horse industry were very upset and basically doing that. And obviously then the internet came along, and a lot of the fear around online stores and the retail stores being disrupted. And then apparently now the big fear is AI.
AI. I was going to say
everyone's really nervous around what that's going to be doing to society, and does this how much of this is going to change things? Am I going to be losing my job? And I think that type of change is obviously disruptive, but I think over time it becomes a net good. Whether this AI is going to be a different one to all of the previous, or just another technology where, as a result, we all get things a little bit better because of it, we'll let to be seen. I'm kind of in the belief that it'll hopefully make things better for everyone. But we'll have to
see how that plays
out. Yeah.
So then what about then, let's look at the role that you might believe that education and mentorship could play in helping individuals develop the mindset and the kind of attitude that is necessary to overcome the fear of failure, or to take risks. I think from what I'm hearing from you, it sounds like it's quite fascinating. Your mindset is already geared towards what works. Let's look at how do we build things, how do we grow. You didn't have that fear starting your own business. It was just maybe because you said you grew up with parents who were very business orientated, and all your research has shown that actually entrepreneurship is not as risky as a lot of people think it is. So it's, for your answers are showing me more that your view of the world is much more to that kind of slant, that let's just get on with it and build and see what works and keep building and growing what works. But I know a lot of your, like Civitas has a learning component and a mentoring or a peer, I think you call it a peer learning component to it. So what role does education and mentorship actually play in helping people develop that kind of mindset and the skills necessary to confront and deal with fear and failure and rejection and all of those negative things that we perceive comes with things not working the way we want?
Yeah, so I think that knowledge is one of the ways to basically control that. Where, say, for example, if you have never done something before. So when I was younger, I was really, really nervous at public speaking. And basically, as a result, I wanted to get good at it. So I joined Toastmasters and then would go and visit all the different clubs. And then I got a lecturing job where I was doing the job of three lecturers as well as doing some Toastmasters. So at one stage, I was, I don't know, speaking publicly like 25 hours a week or 20 hours a week. And as a result, like one day, all of the fear just disappeared because it was like, no.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the fear is the fear of negative consequences of the unknown. And I think if you just learn enough about a domain or something that you want to do and chat to other people, like that can resolve a bunch of the fear. Some of the other ideas that I think around fear is the anxiety basically a biological process? So, for example, if you drink alcohol in vast quantities and you get a hangover the next day, you feel really, really rubbish. So there's a great book. Forgotten the author, but it's by a Harvard psychiatrist called Brain Energy. And basically, what he's pushing is a new theory around basically mitochondrial dysfunction, which is not producing enough energy, and causes the body to work incorrectly. And if the body's not producing enough energy, that enough energy doesn't get to the brain, and as a result, the brain doesn't function properly. And to certain people, that will create high levels of anxiety. So the one option is to really understand the domain. The other option is your biology in very good health? Like, are you exercising, getting a lot of sun? Do you have lots of loving, healthy relationships in your life? Are you eating well? Are you getting enough sleep? So some of that sort of anxiety or fear could just be a biological process and not actually be mental. So sometimes a friend of mine once said in one of the CEO groups that like Western society is very focused on like the talk therapy and the cognitive and the journaling and the meditation. But it's amazing if you're stressed about something and you go do like an hour run, hard run, how the problem just gets a lot smaller after like an hour run in nature. And yeah, it's something to think about. Is it actually a cognitive way where it's an issue with how I'm thinking, or is it just actually biology causing the fear?
That is a very good point, because I know that, yeah, the body has such an impact to play. And if you haven't slept properly or you haven't eaten well, it can affect your state, and your state affects how you perceive whatever's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very,
And
very
he's
interesting
got these
point.
amazing case studies where he's helped people with schizophrenia through dietary change and exercise change, literally reverse schizophrenia, which they thought was impossible. And he actually did many years of research because he would be worried he was going to be called a quack, because he's a Harvard psychiatrist. And he said if he published these case studies, he would have been torn apart by the academia. So he actually, for 15 years, didn't publish his research and did a ton of research, built the theory up in the background. And then only once he was at a really solid theory, meaning a lot of people misunderstand. A theory is not some theoretical guess. It's actually theory, when used in the academic term, is a scientifically validated, evidence-based model of the world. So that type of version, that he had enough evidence to prove it was how it all worked, then he only published it to the general public and the academic world.
Interesting. So part mentoring, so part speaking to people to learn about the fear, but also doing a lot of work to just check your biology. Is your actual physical state conducive to managing anxiety-provoking situations? Just to
100%,
sum
yeah.
up there.
Yeah, like there's a amazing. I don't know if anyone's a Henry Rollins fan, but I was reading last week. I think The Iron and the Soul by Henry Rollins, a bit of a rock star, and he just talks about um, how basically doing a lot of gym and putting on actual muscle mass like completely changes the state. And there's actually quite a lot of scientific evidence behind that, that like your body mass, muscle mass, is a good predictor of mental health. Like if you're doing a lot of gym and actually have quite a bit of muscle, you're going to be mentally healthier than someone who doesn't, on average.
It's also found that if you want to feel stronger in your life, if you actually build the strength in your muscles, it does help. It's not just about a mental strength. The physicality is one way to access a mental strength as well.
Yeah, 100%.
100%. All right. So then what about if we just look, because I talk about risk and rise, we want to obviously try and rise like you. So you were saying people to grow, but there's a lot of fear around risk, or the concept I've been toying with or playing with is the risk fitness, our fitness that we develop in handling and taking risks. You do a lot of work around decision frameworks, like how do we make decisions, if I'm correct, in understanding that. So how does decision, like what can you share around how we make decisions in relation to risks?
Yeah, I mean, so I think the simplest to make it super practical is we really encourage a lot of the founders to, when they've got a big decision, just to, it's usually prioritization is the big problem. Should I do something and where should I, when and when should I do it? So we encourage people to just map out, say, for example, okay, you've got a bunch of projects this quarter that you want to do in your company. And you could obviously do this in your life as well. What you want to do is map out those projects and then go, okay, cool. What is the impact this is going to have on revenue growth? So if I build this feature, or the other one is customer experience, or like, is this going to be like high impact, medium impact, and low impact? And then the second one is that we encourage to look at is basically the effort. So your cost and time. Is this going to take a long time, like high, medium, or low? And ideally, what you want to optimize is things that are going to be quick to do, but they have a big impact on the business. And then the other one you can add in is your best guess probability that it's going to work out. So is this like a slam dunk? We've got good evidence that this is going to work. Or is this like a long shot? And just putting some kind of quick guess around that. I think it's most people when they're making decisions, uh, that's something that's super simple, 5 minutes, and basically can just help you think through your decisions. It's super easy to do that. We encourage a lot of the founders and CEOs to do. The second one from a decision book is that super easy to do is just increase the number of options when you're making a decision. So basically, if you've got two options, there was a great study where they did where the more options you have, the more likely you are to make a better decision. So the idea is if you've got between one and two options, is there a third or fourth or fifth option that might be better than just the two options that you have on the table? And that'll usually enable you to then like just think a little bit wider, get a little bit more creative, and maybe be able to get what you want without taking the risk, looking for that asymmetric risk where you get high upside with little risk, which is obviously the goal.
But what about the other side where some people feel like they have got too many options, so they actually get like almost analysis paralysis. They can't make a decision because they just see there's so many different outcomes to this, so many different ways I could do this. It's almost they go into overwhelm. Or is that not?
Yeah, so I think for that one, basically like a deadline is a good thing to say, okay, this decision has to be made by that. And then the other one is kind of just doing a rank order, like as I described earlier. So what you can then do is that we put a lot of options on the table. Let's rank order them around what matters, and then delete. And I mean, like just maybe focus on the top two or three once you've kind of done some rank ordering. The other really good idea is sort of the full body yes. I've heard a decision where you've got the rational and you've got the emotional. And basically, can you do things that is emotionally exciting plus mentally makes sense? We're all super busy. We've all got too much on our plate. So can you rather focus on things that are hell yes, where
Yes.
it's like good for your head, good for the heart, and you're really excited about it, and just say no to everything else. I don't think a lot of people might enjoy the fact that their life gets a lot simpler doing less.
But hopefully with a lot more enjoyment, satisfaction. Right. In South Africa, there's a lot of talk that we have a strong fear of failure, and even that poppy syndrome, I think it's called, where someone does kind of reaches a level of success, and then everyone pulls them down again. So it's almost like we don't want to see people succeed very well, but we also have a strong sense of failure. And some people have said it's more because of what other people might say if someone failed. It's the fear of rejection, actually, the behind the fear. So hence there's less people starting businesses. There's less people willing to actually take that plunge. So just wondered, from your experience in South Africa, what do you see in the landscape around some of that talk or that experience, that what might be holding people back from starting businesses?
So I'm a little bit out of date with all the academic research, but there's a lot of work being done on this, on like trying to understand how do you get people to start businesses. Um, and I do think, I mean, there is a non-profit foundation that basically looks at the most impressive young founders they could possibly find, and they fund them from an early age. And I did a little bit of work with them, and what was interesting there is that a lot of these people came from tough backgrounds. So they were the first people to land basically like a McKinsey job, or a Bain, or a Discovery, or a Standard Bank, like a really cushy corporate job, from a disadvantaged background. And then they're earning good money. But the family's also reliant on them at the same time. They're going to get promoted because they're sort of with the whole BE. So it doesn't make a lot of sense from like a risk perspective if you've got a whole bunch of dependents looking after you. So that's sort of the one antidotal sort of thing. And I don't know what the solution is there, because the whole focus of that organization was to try help create entrepreneurs. And what ended up happening is a lot of them ended up in high paying corporate jobs, as opposed to entrepreneurship. But you can understand from like the context that, that's not, it's like a wise decision if you take the situation that they're currently in. And then I think that like there's a lot of research that there are a bunch of different things that can increase the odds that someone starts a business. Being exposed to it, doing an entrepreneurship course increases the odds. But I think that probably, I don't know if I have a really good answer around South African context and what we could be doing more. I mean, I think there's so much more we could do to make the business environment from a policy level like friendlier to founders, which I think would make a massive difference. But I think that you need political will, and there's not that political will in the country right now. So unfortunately, I don't think that's a viable solution.
So we just plod along, carry on. Is there something as society we could do to encourage people to take that leap? Because I just think, part of it is developing ourselves as entrepreneurs. How do we manage our own relationship with risk and with fear and with failure, and develop the right mindset? But I just wondered if there's something that society or the community could be doing that would support those that are ready or wanting to. step outside. Yeah, there definitely could be stuff we could do in terms of the
Yeah,
law.
I mean, to be honest, like I think the real root core of it is around the whole education stuff. So there's not a lack of jobs. I think that I remember seeing some stats that if you looked at like people who had a couple years work experience, they had university degree, they were basically the employment rate is quite low for that segment of the population in South Africa. The biggest issue is that we have lots of people that um, don't have the skills to be useful in a modern economy. And that's a failure of the education system. And I think that what we need to do is fix that as a society. We need to take on SATU, the unions, and we need to basically get our schools performing well, and really aiming for a real increase and improvement in that, and then universities as well. Because I think if you have well-educated people that can get a job, it's a lot less risky to start a business because you can just know that, okay, cool, I can quit my job. And if I don't succeed, I can go get a job again because I've got a unique, sort of a valuable skill. I think it's very different where um, you really struggle for years to find your first job. You know, you don't want to quit that because you might not get another one. So yeah, I think that would be probably just as a guess one of the big solves that we would have to get right at a society level.
Oh, promoting education and quality education. All right, tell us a bit about, is it pronounced Civitas?
Yeah, Civitas.
What you're doing and how that can help entrepreneurs, and that also how can people get hold of you?
So you can just go to the Civitas website, www.civitas.network, CIVITAS. And what we are doing there is we brought together a community of high growth founders in South Africa. So the idea there is that you have these talent hotbeds all over the world. Silicon Valley produces most of the great technology companies. You have Hollywood producing lots of the great movies. You've got running groups in Kenya that produce incredible amounts of runners. You've got sprinters in Jamaica that produce incredible amount of sprinters. So our thought was that could we maybe help create more high growth entrepreneurs if we brought them all together? You got the top few hundred, 500,000 founders in each city to be part of a network where they could connect and learn from each other, share learnings, compete with each other, help each other level up. And that's what Civitas is. So we got 2 chapters at the moment. We're based in Cape Town and Joburg, and mostly tech and services businesses, with people looking to like double, triple, quadruple revenue every year, mostly in the 5 million to 500 million revenue range. That's basically the crew. And yeah, we do events, we do CEO groups where they get put in almost an advisory board mastermind group of similar founders that they meet on a monthly basis. There's a digital community of WhatsApp and content. And yeah, and the idea there is to try have as a bigger impact and just make the journey a little bit easier if you're the type of person who's building a high growth company.
Yeah, and I attended one of your networking events. It was such fun. It was so much energy and such an interesting conversation. So it's well worth having a look at. Can I ask you some rapid fire questions as we come to the end then?
Super, Talana. Shoot.
Okay. What comes to mind when I say failure?
No, blank. No answer there.
Which is very interesting. What is your secret weapon for bouncing back from a setback?
I do something called lemonade journaling, where I just try to say, okay, cool. How do we reframe this into an opportunity? So just bang out as many sort of, okay, cool. How do I make this work for me? How's it a good thing?
It's journaling.
Lemonade. Turn the lemon into lemonade.
Yes. What is the most important lesson you've learned as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, that execution is really, really important. And that, yeah, I think getting really great at execution is always going to help you as a founder.
And what's the best advice you have ever received as an entrepreneur?
I think probably there's so much, but some of the one you don't hear enough, but is probably, I think, the best advice that most founders don't is raise prices. Most founders are not charging enough. And there's a sort of a strategic reason you want to do that is that if you can raise your prices, you have more money to spend on marketing and sales. You've got more money to spend on improving the product or service. And basically, sometimes when you raise pricing, you actually can grow faster because of that.
And what inspires you to get out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of interested in what type of future I could create. So I don't know. It's been a long road, but just seeing how far I could take this thing with Civitas, see what I can build, I guess, is kind of interesting to me. Yeah, where I'm kind of interested in where this is going to all end up.
Oh, curious side to you. It's a great, maybe then just to end off then, what advice would you give to individuals who are hesitant to kind of pursue their entrepreneurial dreams, mostly due to fear of failure? But in light of your experiences, is there any parting like kind of wisdom you can share that would help those people?
Yeah, I think they should be scared. It can be a long, tough journey. And I think if the odds are against you. So my take there is that you wanna chat to smart people, ideally in your domain, to help you on the journey. So if you're starting an ad agency, go and see if you can find some smart ad people to help you save a few years of poor decisions. I think that would be the single one is one of a simple thing that you could do that would really potentially move the needle of making it work.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
Thanks so much, Talana. Really appreciate your time.
This has been Risk and Rise with me, Talana Simpson. Hope you've enjoyed today's show and you'll consider sharing it with some friends so that we can spread the word and get some more interest in risking and rising. I found the conversation with Paul very interesting today and just left me with some food for thought, especially around the physicality and how our physical state can actually impact the way we engage with fear. So I don't know what you're taking away. I would love to know. Let me know via hello@riskandrise.co.za. And otherwise, let's go out into the world and start risking and rising together. Thank you for joining me on Risk and Rise, where we face fears, conquer challenges, and rise above adversity to achieve our dreams. Find out more at riskandrise.co.za.